Dear friends, today we have the special privilege to listen to a senior nun from the convent, Vedanta convent in San Francisco, Virajaprana, Pravrajika Virajaprana. She was initiated in spiritual life in 1972. She was initiated by Swami Prabhuddhananda, and then she got her what is called brahmacharya vows as well as the monastic vows from Swami Asheshananda, a direct disciple of Holy Mother. She was instrumental in compiling and editing the beautiful book on the photographs of Swami Vivekananda. She manages a lot of activities with great zeal and devotion at the Vedanta Society of Northern California in San Francisco, as well as their retreat centers, especially at Ulima. You see her always busy working, and yet with that serene calmness. I was very much impressed by that. Pravrajika Virajaprana.
Thank you, Swamiji. Good evening, everyone. Light. Let me turn this light on. That's fine. Thank you. Thank you. As Swamiji has mentioned, our subject for this evening is opening the door of the heart. The mystics from all religious traditions emphasize the heart as the seat of spiritual awareness. When we step into the heart, we are actually stepping into infinity. According to Vedanta, it is in the heart that the Atman is revealed, our true self is revealed to us, where we have a direct experience of our true nature. Now, the Christian mystics speak at length of the prayer of the heart, especially the Orthodox, Eastern Orthodox Greeks and Russians in the book The Philokalia, which in translation means love. Philo means love of the good or the transcendent. There they have actually laid out in detail the methodology of the prayer of the heart. So the heart is the core of our existence. It's the hub, it's the seat of our intense feelings, of our emotions. And in the spiritual sense, it is the seat of the intuitive faculty by which we intuit our true nature. It opens vast dimensions of awareness that ordinarily lie dormant in us in our relative state of consciousness. Now, in her masterpiece, The Interior Castle, the Spanish mystic Saint Teresa of Avila, 16th century Spanish mystic, speaks about the ascent of the soul entering into the heart by passing through 7 mansions of the castle. The castle is the soul, and the 7 mansions are the dimensions of spiritual awareness. She describes it very beautifully and poetically as entering in the courtyard and then ascending up the various levels until the individual soul actually becomes one with God at the uppermost mansion. And through that experience, she explains that once the soul becomes united with the divine, never again are they separated. They have become one. And she gives very homely examples, much like Sri Ramakrishna did. She was a very simple woman She lived in the country, and she would use examples from her everyday life to illustrate some of these very high mystical experiences. And I'll mention just a couple. In this instance, she says, when it rains, the water that falls from the sky gets mingled with the water in a stream or a river. Then how can you designate which water came from the sky and which water was already in the stream? They become one. Another example she gives is if you take 2 wicks from 2 separate candles and you join those wicks together, becomes 1 wick, and it illumines, there's just 1 light coming from that candle. So in this way, another example she gives is a room that has windows on opposite sides, and the sunlight pours in through the different windows, but when the light enters the room, it's 1 light. Now, from a different angle, from Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, these 7 levels of consciousness are described as the 7 chakras. The 3 lower chakras pertain to our ordinary sense life as we know and experience it. And the 4th level is known as the Anahata chakra, and that is where spiritual life actually begins, at the heart center, at the 4th center. This is the seat of intuition, the seat of higher awareness. Now, Sri Ramakrishna mentions, he gives an example. He says, ordinarily the master of the house can be found anywhere in the house, but generally you'll find him in the drawing room, and we might say, we would call it the living room. So in that way, the Lord is especially manifest in the heart of his devotee. It is there that his special power is manifest in the heart. The 3 centers above the heart, the throat center, Vishuddha, the center between the eyebrows, Ajna, and the top of the head, Sahasrara, are also all are doors to spiritual consciousness. All of these 4 higher levels lead us to spiritual awareness. However, for the most part, our teachers emphasize the heart center, to concentrate on the heart center. Now, our task in spiritual life, as put before us by our masters, is to try to lift our consciousness from the lower centers to the higher center. And the struggle and the tension is that once we try to lift our consciousness up to a higher center, then we try not to lose the ground that we've gained by maintaining our consciousness at a higher level and not letting it slip down to the force of gravity to the lower levels where it likes to slip. Sri Ramakrishna used to say in a very simple way, 2 methods or 2 ways that we can do this is through yearning and sincerity. So we have to have a general interest in trying to lift our consciousness to a level beyond what we are ordinarily accustomed to in our sense life. If we're not generally interested, then it's not possible, or it becomes very difficult to give an interior direction to the mind whose natural tendency is to gravitate towards the lower centers. So we have to have this sincere wish inside to lift up. That's our struggle in spiritual life. It basically boils down to that, trying to lift our awareness up. Because according to Vedanta, we're always that self-luminous Atman, we're always that infinite self. We simply have to become aware of it. Now, once one of Sri Ramakrishna's disciples, Swami Brahmananda, was asked by a disciple, where shall I meditate on my Ishtam, or my chosen deity? And the Swami said, you should meditate on the chosen deity in the heart. Now, this disciple questioned the Swami, how can I think of my chosen ideal in the heart, in the physical heart? The Swami said, no, it's not like that. It's not the physiological heart. But the Atman actually resides in the core of the heart. So you meditate and you reflect on your chosen deity in the heart. Yes, initially maybe consciousness of the body will arise, But if you persist, you will completely forget about the body, and the only thing remaining will be the luminous form of your chosen deity. Now, the Upanishads, the Shrutis, the scriptures that are revealed by the rishis who have seen these truths, are the primary source for this idea of Hridaya in the Upanishads. In the Mundaka Upanishad, it is poetically stated, "In the sky of the heart, the luminous city of Brahman, he is established, clothed in the mind and guiding life and body. With his seat in the heart, he lives in the whole body of man. By perfect knowledge of him, the wise realize the state of blissful immortality." Now, according to our teachers of the spiritual masters, the heart is the pure center. It is the seat of the Atman, and it is in the heart that we first feel the light of the Supreme Spirit, who exists in our soul as the soul of our soul, as a Paramatman within. The divinity, according to the Shvetashvatara Upanishad, states that it is he who has created this universe and who pervades everything and always dwells in the hearts of everyone and everything. And he appears finite through our emotions, through our will, through our intellect, through our imagination. The Atman appears, as it were, as if he were limited. So the Atman takes the form of our shape of our minds. In our embodied state and in our ignorance, we make this big mistake. And we identify the Atman with our small self. But in truth, the Atman is never limited. As we experience ourself in our current state, we are definitely limited. Now, in the Upanishads, there is an analogy given of the lotus of the heart. I'm sure many of you have read that. It's a very poetical description, and it represents the heart center. It's usually referred to in Sanskrit as Brahmapuram, or the city of Brahman. The Sanskrit word that's often associated with this is divye. Divye means luminous, and the word divya or deva comes from the Sanskrit root, and it means that which is effulgent, which is shining. So the spiritual seekers, all of us, are encouraged by the mystics to visualize and meditate on this effulgence in the region of our hearts as a smokeless, brilliant light. Again, the Mundaka Upanishad tells us, vast, beyond all imagination, shines the truth of Brahman. It is subtler than the subtlest. It is farther than the farthest. It is here within the body. And the sages realize it verily in this life as fixed in the heart. Now, though the infinite is vast and it's beyond all conception and ideation, it is the nearest of the near. It is the very core of our being. Often the Atman is described as deep within. We hear that far beyond, it's within the cave of the heart, etc., as if it's hidden or it's inaccessible. And why is this language used? It is simply because it is so subtle. It is not obvious to our ordinary awareness. In various ways, the Upanishads express this idea of the heart center, and it's based on the experience of the rishis. The practical value is that it stimulates our creative imagination. It expedites our efforts at meditation. The Katha Upanishad puts it in this way, very poetical and very suggestive. The Purusha, the size of a thumb, the inner soul, dwells always in the hearts of all beings One should separate him from the body as the central stalk from the rush grass. Those of you who have seen the rush grass, you know that you can separate out the stalk. It's completely separated from the rest. Know him to be pure, the immortal, yea, the pure, the immortal. Now here the Upanishad is clearly telling us that the Atman, though dwelling in our heart, is completely detached, being of the nature of pure spirit. For only that which is immaterial, which is pure spirit, can be immortal. Everything else that is composed of parts will eventually disintegrate and fall apart. His form is not within the field of vision. None of us can see him with our physical eyes, but he is revealed to us by the intuition within the heart, which controls our minds. As Swami Brahmananda told his disciple, the heart in this context is not the physical, physiological heart that's being referred to, but it is the Atman that subtly resides in the region of the heart. The yogis say that there is this region in the middle of the body which is composed of akasha, or ether. It's a luminous space. In the Mahanarayana Upanishad, the ancient rishi declared, there is a pure, subtle, stainless seat. It is lotus-like in form and is situated in the middle of the body. Within this lies the sorrowless akasha, or space within the heart. Meditation is to be practiced there. When we dwell on this akasha, or this luminous space that exists within our heart, a small space, we begin to feel that that space expands into a much larger space. It opens out everywhere into a limitless space. Now, the word akasha in Sanskrit has a very comprehensive meaning. If we consider, for example, the space within this auditorium, we know that it is not confined within the walls, the four walls here. The space within this building is one with the infinite space outside and inside. The walls only appear to contain it. Similarly, the space within our heart appears to be a small space, but actually it's an unlimited, infinite space. And that is why the door of the heart, which is now closed, has to be opened. When we open that door through spiritual sadhana, we step through, so to speak, into infinite existence, which in Vedanta is referred to as Sat, in the phrase Sat Chit Ananda. The physical heart is the center of our existence as we know it. If we become blind, if we become deaf, or we become lame, we continue to exist. And we experience life as we ordinarily do. But if our heart stops, our life comes to an end. And we say, that person has left us. That person has passed away. What has actually happened there is that the body has passed away. Nothing has happened to the person. The spiritual heart is the center of our entire being, which of course includes the physical heart. But the spiritual heart is immortal. Now, our teachers try to expand our conception of the heart and the meaning of the center, spiritual center of the heart. And they give us a mental exercise, which is very helpful for meditation. They suggest that we try to become aware of our consciousness, just our physical consciousness. Often our minds are so scattered we're not even aware of ourselves as physical beings. They say focus your attention, your awareness on the consciousness that enlivens your entire body from your top of your head to your toes. Become aware of the fact that every part of your body as you know it is conscious. Then extend that consciousness to your mental field of awareness and feel that consciousness in every mental state, waking, dream, and deep sleep. That consciousness is there. Then they ask us to project that awareness that we feel in this limited sense to the outside and connect ourselves with the entire universe. That consciousness pervades the entire universe. What we think is very small is actually connected to something that is very large. Consciousness is one undivided existence, but the door has to be opened. I'm reminded of a children's book, some of you may have read it, by C.S. Lewis. C.S. Lewis was a Christian, and he had some mystical inclinations. And he wrote a book called The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Some of you have read this. I'll make it short. What happens in this book is that 3 children enter into a wardrobe. They open the door and they enter into this wardrobe which contained lots of clothes, like a big closet. When they entered into it, they had to make their way through all of the clothing, all of these heavy coats and clothing in the closet. But what they found when they got to the back of the wardrobe was there was no barrier there. There was nothing there. There was no wall, and they stepped into an entirely different world. So we could use that children's story as sort of an example of stepping through this small door of the heart into an infinite world that's far beyond what we ordinarily experience. That is what happened to them. In the Virajaprana Upanishad, the teacher explains this truth in a section entitled Antarayami Brahmana, the inner Brahman. This infinite spirit dwells on the earth, dwells in water, in fire, in the sky, in the air, in the heaven, in the sun and the moon, as well as the stars. He also dwells in our eye, in our mind, in our intellect. He permeates everything. He is the inner controller. He is our own immortal self. So the individual and the universal are eternally linked. As I mentioned, our individual consciousness is part of this vast consciousness. This is what we are trying to uncover in our spiritual sadhana. We are not small beings. We are infinite beings. This space within our heart cannot exist without being part of a much larger infinite space as support. The individual and the cosmic one are inseparable. So this is the goal in spiritual life. We must realize the connection of the two in the heart. As St. Teresa has told us, when the water falls into the stream and gets mingled, they become one. We can put it in another way. When we enter into our hearts, we become aware of God's intimate and immediate, loving, transforming presence. The center of the heart is a center of freedom. And it's where we experience ourselves as one with the source of all life. That is why the door must be opened. The implied meaning of all of these Upanishadic verses that we are hearing is that a person becomes immortal when the Atman is revealed through direct experience. We are always that Atman. Nothing can ever negate that truth. But as we know in Vedanta, as we say, Maya covers that truth. It's just as if the sun is shining, some clouds pass over that radiant sunshine, and for the moment it seems to dim the light, but the sun continues to shine unabated. When the clouds blow away, the sun shines as it always has. So how does a seeker go about opening the door? That's the question. So from the Vedantic point of view, we know, according to Sri Ramakrishna, according to Shankaracharya and many other teachers, Divine Mother alone, we know, she holds the key to the door. But short of divine grace, there's something we have to do also. And in Vedanta, the method is given as threefold: Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana. Shravana means hearing. Manana means reflection. Nididhyasana means deep meditation. And though we will touch on all three, I would like to give special attention to manana, reflection, because it is a very important preliminary for real meditation. So Shravana, hearing. In a sense, we can say that Shravana is not really hearing as we normally think of hearing, but it's listening, listening with attention and listening with interest. If we don't have interest in something that we're listening to, what happens? It goes in this ear and it goes right out that ear. So in order to make an impression on our hearts, we have to be interested in what we're listening to. So the teachers say, Shravana, listen with attention and with interest. And what are we going to listen to? We're going to listen to those who know. So our great spiritual masters, what they have taught us, what we hear from advanced spiritual seekers, what we read in the scriptures and the Shruti. This is how we hear and are exposed to the truth. Swami Brahmananda used to tell serious spiritual seekers, when it comes to learning about meditation, to read only books that are written by those who have seen, who have known the truth. There are thousands and thousands of books, and we can't possibly read all those books, nor should we. We don't want to base our life on hearsay. We want to base our life and practice on the words of those who know, who have had direct experience. So after hearing the truth, the seeker needs to reflect. The Sanskrit word is manana. We can equate it with the Christian idea of contemplation. The Christian mystics speak a great deal about contemplation. This in Vedanta is known as reflection. Now, one of the great advantages of reflection is that it helps to slow down our thinking process. The average mind has often been compared to a drunken monkey who has been stung by a scorpion and possessed by an evil spirit. So what does that tell us? It tells us that the average mind is very restless and rajasic. We just jump from one chaotic thought to the next. And although we pride ourselves on being very rational in our thinking, very organized and very systematic, if we think about it, we realize that our thinking is basically driven by our prejudices, by our likes and dislikes. So many things condition our thinking. And our minds move so fast that we barely have a breathing space to recognize that we're being dragged around and dominated, commandeered by our ego, which takes over and directs our intentions and thus our actions. So manana helps us to slow way, way down. Helps us to slow down. It gives us a better perspective of where we are here and now and where we need to go. And so this is a very important preliminary to actually try to practice meditation. So deep thinking is necessary for conviction. It's very necessary. Why? When we contemplate or mull over in this way the words of the Upanishads, layers of meaning are disclosed as we penetrate beyond the superficial meaning of words that we ordinarily associate. In our lives, this is how we live in the relative world, by a law of association. So our minds associate words with certain concepts and ideas. But when we turn it in a spiritual way, we start to reveal more profound meanings to the words. The rishis were what is known as kavis. They were poets, as described in the Isha Upanishad. So their words appeal to the intuitive part of our minds, not just the rational, four-square, mechanical process of the mind with its ratiocinations. That's how we normally think. But when we base our thinking on the words of the rishis, something else awakens within us. So reflection helps us in this way to bypass the ordinary interpretations of words as we usually associate them in our limited experience. And it brings deeper and deeper and more profound meaning to us. So let's take an example. We'll do a little exercise here. The verse that I quoted earlier from the Mundaka Upanishad, let's go through a possible reflection on this verse that we might engage in concerning the ideas concerned in this verse. And all of you can do this mentally in your own way. Here's the verse. Vast, divine, beyond all imagination, shines the truth of Brahman. It is subtler than the subtlest. It is farther than the farthest. It is here within the body. And the sages realize it. Verily, in this life, not the next life, in this life itself, is fixed in the heart. So let's look closely and reflect on what this verse is saying. The first word is brihad. It is vast. This divine being is vast. So when we try to conceive of vastness, what comes to mind? For anyone, what comes to mind? Well, perhaps the limitless expanse of the sky or space with its millions and millions of stars and planets, some billions and billions of light years away, mind-boggling amounts of physical space. Maybe a shoreless ocean where the sky and the water meet. Maybe a desert with miles and miles of sand as far as you can see, with no end in sight. Now, these examples, of course, are all physical. It's a sense-perceived vastness, but we have to start somewhere. But when we might imagine this vast space that exists within our heart, it is a space that is effulgent, and it's without borders or limits. It extends infinitely above and below, to the right, to the left, before and behind. You cannot find any limit. The Mundaka declares, in the luminous sheath of intelligence, in the deepest core of a person, dwells Brahman, stainless, indivisible, pure. He is the light of all that shines. That is what the knowers of the self realize. Now, in this way, in trying to conceive of the vast, what we consider vast, without any barriers, any limit, we stretch our creative imagination in an attempt to break through, to catch a glimpse of, to conceive that which is inconceivable. Next, divine. He's vast, he's divine. When we reflect on the nature of divinity, what comes to mind? When you think of a divine being, you think of compassion, purity, perfection, mercy, grace, infinite bliss, and immortality. These are some of the qualities that we associate with the word divine. Now, another meaning in Sanskrit that's used here is the idea of effulgence or light. And in all religious traditions, light is used to illustrate wisdom or illumination. So this luminosity of the spirit is inferred from the physical light of the sun. So if we reflect on spiritual effulgence, we might start with the concept or visualization of physical light. That's the beginning. But as our reflection becomes more subtle, we conceive of a different kind of luminosity, which is immaterial. Now, in the Virajaprana Upanishad, there is a conversation between the sage Yajnavalkya and King Janaka. And there, King Janaka questions this great sage. What serves as jyoti? What serves as the light for a man? And Yajnavalkya says, well, the sun serves as light for a man. When the sun is there, a person can go out, they move, they do their duties, and they come back. And Janaka says, and when the sun sets, the moon serves as light for a man. Person goes out by moonlight, does this, does that, he comes back. And Janaka says, and there's no moon? Well, then fire serves as light for a man. By the light of the fire, so many things can happen. I go out, I do my duties, I can do this and that, and I come back. And Janaka says, when the fire is extinguished, what serves as light? Speech serves as light. So if we're in a completely dark room and there are two of us and you speak to me, some knowledge, some light comes to me through speech. And when there's no speech, then Yajnavalkya reveals the truth. Atman serves as the light for the man. Now, both Mundaka and Katha Upanishads refer to this spiritual light that Yajnavalkya is instructing King Janaka. The sun does not shine there, nor the moon, nor the stars, nor these lightnings. What to speak of this fire? He's shining, everything shines after him. By his light, all of this is lighted. Our reflection continues. Beyond all imagination shines the truth of Brahman. Brahman is beyond all imagination. Here the Upanishad is telling us that the self is far, far beyond or divorced from any mentation as we can think of it. We can never imagine the infinite. How can we wrap our minds around the infinite? The truth is beyond thought. Thought, ideas, words, speech, they're all related. We cannot have one without the other. As the Taittiriya Upanishad says, Yato vacho nivartante aprapya manasa saha. Mind and speech went out in search of the great Atman, and they had to come back because they couldn't reach that great Atman. Speech and mind can never reach that. And still, like a Zen koan, we are asked to try to conceive, to try to imagine what's on the other side of imagination. It is subtler than the subtlest. Whatever is the subtlest thought that we can possibly have or object that we can perceive, even if it's through a electron microscope or some other instrument that's even finer, the Atman is subtler than that. It's incomparable. It's so fine, so rarefied, that it is neither perceivable nor cognizable. It is farther than the farthest, the verse says. And we can add it's nearer than the nearest. Because the implication is Atman is neither far nor near. It alone exists. The idea is no matter what we conceive of, no matter how far it is, the Atman's farther than that. And no matter how close something to us is, the Atman's closer than that. So our mind here is pushed out of its comfort zone to try to think out of the box. By juxtaposing opposite concepts, far and near, it becomes clear that the Atman cannot be measured, it cannot be categorized as ordinary objects. It's all pervading. So in relation to what can it be far or near? And finally, the verse says, It is here, right here, within the body. And the sages realize it in this life as fixed in the heart. Now, when we think about this, we realize that yes, the Atman as we experience it, it is conditioned. It's conditioned by our bodies and minds. This is our only starting point. We have to begin from where we are, from what is real to us. And we have faith in the words of our great teachers. They have had this realization, the Atman is fixed in the heart. Because of the Atman's presence, we think, we breathe, we move, we exist. And the Taittiriya Upanishad says, who could exist without this bliss in the heart? We couldn't exist if this bliss were not there in our hearts. So the Upanishads are telling us that the Atman is immanent, it's within everything, it's transcendent. It's conditioned, it's unconditioned. It's all-pervading. How can we prove this empirically? We cannot. We have to experience it. It's a matter of deep spiritual experience. We accept it because we have shraddha, faith in our teachers, in the words of our teachers, and in our spiritual masters, all of them, in the scriptures. And there's also another reason. Because it's truth. And it's central to the core of our being. All of us have a vague sense of our immortality. It may not be clearly defined, but it is there. And perhaps that is one reason why we feel that we will never die. Because that's the truth. We will never die. We're immortal. As spiritual beings, we can never die. So reflection or manana helps us do three things. One, it helps us to reinforce our convictions. We slow our thinking down, we mull over these words, they start to reveal deeper and deeper meanings for us that reinforces our conviction. Yes, this is the truth. Second, it helps to focus our attention. Focus our attention in our hearts. Third, it clarifies our ideas for real meditation. So reflection is like gently knocking at the door. Now, pounding on the door doesn't help. We can't force the door to open. Jesus said, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God." The door opens of itself from the other side, not as a direct result of our knocking. And yet, as Sri Ramakrishna says, we have to unfurl our sail. We have to knock. Self-effort is required. But our teachers tell us, they remind us, yes, you have to knock, but then you have to wait with patience for the door to open. So through reflection, we learn to live more and more consciously in God's presence, or if you prefer, the spirit within. And this awareness slowly dawns as a result of our interior practice, which enables us to develop and enrich this idea of the heart center. And by concentrating there, it is revealed what being in the divine presence really means. When reflection deepens, contemplation goes deeper, then the use of images and words lessen, and we increasingly become more aware of the living presence of God in our hearts. Our teachers say that when we practice this over a period of time, the body consciousness becomes less. And as we continue our practice, we actually become established in the luminous presence of God. So this kind of practice leads us to nididhyasana, which is a very sophisticated practice, meditation. It is a quieting of the waves of the mind, or the thoughts of the mind, and ultimately stilling the mind. Yet, we're reminded by our teachers that it's a highly dynamic process, and it's compared, you've all heard this example, it's compared to a flame of a candle, say, in a windless place. It's a very dynamic form of energy, but it's absolutely still. And it's also compared to oil being poured from one vessel to another. And I mentioned this morning in Boston, and I'll just repeat it again because I find it very inspiring. One of our late Swamis mentioned that in India, when he was a boy, he used to watch the oil man come and bring oil to the homes of the housewives. And later, when he became a Swami, he said, I fully understood this analogy that's given in the scriptures. Then I didn't understand it, this idea of pouring one oil from one vessel to another. He said what actually happens there in India, the oil was so thick that when the oil man would pour it from one vessel into the housewife's vessel, he said it appeared to be like a thick static column. But actually what was happening was the oil was flowing. It was in a highly dynamic state, but just when you looked at it, it looked as though it was just solid, like a solid column. So when that example is given for the mind and meditation, that's the idea. It looks completely still, as if nothing's happening, but it's a highly dynamic state. All the mental waves are merged into one in that point. And as St. Teresa says, the two wicks become one light. So finally, when the seeker succeeds in entering into the heart center, his body consciousness is forgotten, at least for the moment. And as I mentioned, after some practice, we become more and more established. That's our goal, is to live in the luminous presence of God. Swami Vivekananda said that when one has a pure heart, the door will be opened. The truth will be revealed. As Jesus has told us, just knock, and the door will be opened. Thank you.
Many thanks, dear Virajaprana, for this brilliant and yet very easily simple exposition of this very difficult topic that we think about many times, that what is this meditating in heart, or see, opening up the heart. She invoked so many beautiful quotes from the Upanishads and various other scriptures, and excellently explained how the space here in the heart and the space in the universe, they become one when you see them as one. They are already one, but you see them as one when the heart opens up. This opening of the heart in the spiritual sense, in a way she helped us to go through a spiritual open heart surgery. But important thing is that how she connected it to the physical place, this heart. Because this question crops up very often. Meditate in the heart, it is just a pump flowing, that blood is flowing so continuously. How am I to think of God in the heart there? Especially those associated with medical field, they get this question often, that because they immediately they think that the blood is flowing through all those arteries and veins through the and going into the heart, coming out of the heart. How am I to feel God there? But the idea is, it is the location that we indicate in the body about our innermost core of our being. Once one Swami explained, and I like that analogy, that where do we show our presence? We indicate at our chest. We never say, we don't point to our nose, today I am going to this place. I say, I am going here, we point out to our chest. That is, and also we use this term very often. My heart pained when he said these things to me, or when I saw this. there is not that that man is in an immediate danger of heart attack, but what is meant is that yes, there is the inner core of our being felt that pain. And that is where we have to feel the divine presence. It was very brilliantly, she brought out, Virajaprana brought out the salient features of this, how one should meditate, how the manana, the contemplation on these truths should go on. And I am sure there were so many important points that she compressed in such short time. We need to listen to this talk again and again, think about it, contemplate on the various points she mentioned, and it will be very beneficial for us to do that in our spiritual life. Thank you very much for this beautiful talk.